Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So we're into it again, another conservative national leadership campaign. And I wanted to invite two of my conservative friends. I know some of you out there that follow me are going to be surprised that I have conservative friends, but I have two conservative friends that I want to join with us tonight. Tony Clement. Tony Clement probably doesn't need any introduction. He was a cabinet minister in Ontario, a cabinet minister in Ottawa. I actually had right behind me here in my living room a fundraiser for Tony Clement at one point in time when he was running for leader. I don't remember which time it was running for leader, but it was running for leader, I think federally. And I actually met him when he ran for regional councillor in Toronto and worked on his campaign. He was very, very proud to do it. So a wonderful gentleman. And Tasha Sheridan, who is a principal with Navigator, a columnist in the National Post, and someone that there were rumors was considering to run herself during this last run-up to this leadership campaign. It seems to be on its way. And I understand that Tasha's got a position as national co-chair with the Jean Charest campaign, and Tony Clement is national director of fundraising for the Pierre Poilievre campaign. So both of them not only have great political experience, but are very involved in this current campaign. So maybe Tony, I can ask you first off, if I could, where do you sort of set the scene? We got Pierre Poilievre that appears to be the front runner, Jean Charest, who's just come in recently to the campaign, announced on Thursday, and has a plethora of experience both federally and provincially. We've got an MPP in Ontario that has announced, Roman Baber, and we've got a mayor in Brampton that's also announced. What do you think?
And also, Leslyn Lewis is running again. She's announced that she will run, which brings us up to, I guess that's 5, perhaps, which is great. That's actually more than I thought we're going to run. Last time I was on your show, I predicted we'd have 3 or 4 running, and looks like we're going to have more than that, which is fantastic for the party. It's fantastic for the country to have these differing views. You know, leaderships inside the political party family, it creates some disagreement, and some people get disappointed that somebody isn't supporting them or what have you. But ultimately, I think it is good for the party to renew itself, to have this competition of ideas. So I'm very optimistic. It's going to be a great race, and we're going to hear lots of good ideas from all of the candidates. And the majority of the candidates are legitimate candidates. They should run for the leadership of the party, and that's a good thing.
Tasha, what do you think? Set the scene for us, if you could.
Well, I think Tony said it with the candidates he's mentioned. I'll add a couple of others that Joel Etienne was a candidate for the Conservative Party last round. He set up a website saying he's going to run. And I just got a text actually from Leona Alslav, who I had talked to during my contemplation of a run. And she said she's forging ahead too. So she is, of course, a former MP as well. Previously a Liberal, I will add. For those who are criticizing Jean Charest for switching allegiances, she was a federal Liberal, then she became a federal Conservative. So she's thinking of running. So they're going to be, I agree with Tony. I think there's going to be a good field. I think we're going to have a robust discussion of ideas and of different visions of the country and the party. I think that's very healthy, as long as it, stays above board. I think, I hope it doesn't descend into a lot of personal attacks. It has a little bit so far, but, there'll be opportunity for the candidates to meet people. I think that's really one of the key things, is connecting with the membership and expanding the membership. And I know that the candidates have all been already doing that, which is the most important thing, I think, for building a unified party going forward.
I should mention one other potential candidate, otherwise I'll be banished. Scott Aitchison, who's my local MP, and Perry Salmuskoka wants to run as well. So there you go.
Give us a sense of the critical dates, if you could, Tony. What's the timing that you have to sign up for a member? When does the campaigning start? When is the convention? When is the victor announced?
So the first critical date is April 19th. That's when you have to have all of your money that is required by the party, as well as signatures, and approved by the leadership organizing committee called the LEOC by April 19th. So if you haven't got your stuff together by then, you're not a candidate. Then the next critical date is June the 3rd. People have to sign up to become members of the party. They can do that at conservative.ca or via there will be a process by which each respective leadership campaign can encourage people to sign up. That has to be done by June the 3rd. There will be later, I believe in August, maybe Tasha knows that this date better than I do, when ballots will go out. It'll be a mail-in ballot, ranked ballot system, and the results will be declared on September the 10th.
So not a delegated convention where you come and you get to have the balloons and the whoop up and all that kind of fun and vote ballot by ballot.
No, the last one that was selected by a delegated convention by a legacy party was Kim Campbell in 1993. She beat a guy named Jean Charest for that post. Jean Charest at the time was a junior cabinet minister. Not many people thought he had a chance to beat Kim Campbell, who was this juggernaut in 1993. She had lots of support in caucus and across the country, but he came close. I think it was a 53-47% race by the end. And that sort of made Jean Charest's career as a serious politician for sure.
We're chatting tonight with Tasha Sheridan and Tony Clement about the upcoming Conservative leadership campaign. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more. And I'm going to ask them about some of the issues that I've been reading in the paper and chatting with people about and what they think is going to be the deciding factor in the end. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Some of you probably know I'm a political junkie, and I love to get involved and hear about and talk to the people involved in what's going on in politics. And I think that this Conservative leadership campaign is going to be absolutely fascinating. And I'd like to chat with my two guests tonight, Tony Clement, former MP, former MPP, former cabinet minister, former leadership candidate, and Tasha Sheridan, a principal with Navigator, a big, what do you call it, emergency consulting firm where you've got problems, you go to Navigator and you ask for some advice, as well as a columnist with the National Post and someone who I understand was president of the Young Tories for like 4 years during the Jean Charest time period. Was that not correct?
Right.
That is correct. And on top of that, to reference what Tony said before, I was in the room at the 93 convention when the supporters of Jim Edwards, the third candidate at that convention, put on the pink hats. Those were Kim Campbell's pink hats. And we all stood in the Jean Charest box and went, oh, because we knew it was over. Until that moment, he had a shot. If he'd had those supporters, I think he could have won. But it was an interesting race, and I think it has certain parallels to today because there's the idea of the tortoise and the hare. That was what Kim Campbell famously said of Jean Charest. You're a hell of a tortoise, because she was so far ahead. And this race, I think too, it's not a given at all. I don't think it should be a given who will end up on top, because the ranked ballot also makes a big difference now. The last two races have been won by people who were not the front runners. So it's anyone's game. And I think that's what's going to be interesting. It's a long game too. And I'm sure Brian, you'll be talking to a lot more people along the way as things unfold and all the candidates put their policies and their platforms in the window.
It's interesting because I've been involved in a lot of different leadership campaigns, not necessarily conservative ones, but a lot of different leadership campaigns. And I found often that if you are the front runner, you got to win it on the first ballot. And if not, what you got to do is it's not necessarily the person in second place, but a person maybe in third or fourth place that can jump. And it ends up being a different strategy. So for the front runner, wants everyone to come to them, but the other people really need to make friends because they've got to have that support in the second, third, and fourth ballot. And, I go to the example of Ignatieff versus Ray versus Dion and Kennedy, where Dion ended up winning it. And he was at one point in time in fourth place, I think it was, and then jumped in a liberal leadership convention. I think about Kathleen Wynne, who ended up similarly winning the Ontario leadership because she actually was able to go out and make friends, and some of the others that people thought were the front runners and had a chance and had a lot of the sort of party establishment support ended up not being able to make friends. But then Stephen Del Duca, who's the current leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, didn't make friends with other people. Almost everyone else ganged up against him, but he got more than 50% on that first ballot. And so therefore he won. So Tony, tell me, is the strategy to get over 50%, like lots of front runners suggest for Pierre Poilievre, or is it to make friends and get that second, third, fourth ballot support?
Yeah, and the other example, if I may be so bold, which is the most recent one, is Kevin Falcon in British Columbia, BC Liberal, who was ahead at the beginning of the race. He was ahead in the middle of the race, and he was ahead at the end of the race. So, as it turns out, politics, each individual case is each individual case. So, yeah, I think people have said that Pierre Poilievre is the front runner. I'm not sure how you calculate that. I guess there was some polling that showed him at 40% with conservative voters, but the Poilievre campaign is campaigning as if we're one vote behind, and that's exactly what you should do. I have a saying that I've used since 1994 in politics: you run scared or you run stupid. So we're running really, really hard. I was at 3 different events with Pierre over the last couple of days in the GTA. Lots of enthusiasm, and what really excited me about Pierre was his message of freedom. We need to have a freer society. We need to concentrate on housing affordability generally, those economic issues where he's very strong as the finance critic for the party, and so that's his basic message. And I think that's going to resonate in 905 in your catchment area, Brian, as well as throughout the country. The crowds were large, they were enthusiastic. And I think that's the way it's going to be. He was in Regina last week, and there were 1,000 people who came out for Pierre's event in Regina. So we are generating enthusiasm. And what's the interesting thing is a lot of them are young people, millennials or younger, who are very excited about supporting Pierre and supporting his very, very positive message for the future. So, yeah, we're off to a good start, we feel, but down ballot, who knows? But a lot of people, if you're the front runner, people down ballot will give their support to whomever, and then they'll say, you know what? I kind of like Pierre too, or I like who the front runner is, or the front runner is going to win anyway. So we'll get our fair share of down ballot support as well.
Tasha, what about Jean Charest's strategy? I got the sense that he was counting on some people to support him down ballot, and some of them have announced that they're not running. And I think about
that would be. I think actually no. I decided not to run, just full disclosure, because it was clear we were actually going after the same voters. I don't think it would have been an addition. We were going after the same voters and same supporters, particularly in the province of Quebec, where we're both from. And so it was a question of, if you can't beat them, join them, because we both had the same vision at the end, which is a vision of a united party, a party that is a bigger tent than it is now, that is reaching those voters that Tony just talked about in the 905 in Quebec, and in places where the party's really not done very well, and where it's, urban centers where it's failed to grasp that majority that Stephen Harper did in 2011. So that's really, to me, what this race is about. And the talk of freedom, I believe in freedom just as much as the next person. Unfortunately, I do question whether that is going to resonate as much as a call for unity. And I say that because unity is what people are really lacking in this country right now. Never mind the party. There's a sense of real disconnect and division. People are feeling alienated, particularly in the West. We saw that with the convoy protest. That sense of alienation is, to me, it's something that you have to heal, and you have to say, look, we have to come together. And this is what Jean Charest does best. He is someone who has brought the country together previously in 1995 in the referendum. If we recall, he famously, campaigned and was Captain Canada. And he did go to Quebec, and he did politics in Quebec. And he was premier, as a liberal premier in Quebec, but that's because Quebec doesn't have a conservative party. And anyone who knows politics there, it's like BC, it's a huge crossover of conservatives into that party. And he did that because he felt the country was in peril. And it's the same sort of feeling today. And that's what we're seeing. We had events in Calgary, we had events in Vancouver. It was basically, we had to turn people away from all of them because there was so much demand to come see him. There's a real hunger, I think, in the country for that sense of gravitas, of maturity, of, let's bring people together. We need a rassembleur, as they say in Quebec. And I really feel he fulfills that role. And I really think that's going to resonate throughout the rest of the campaign too.
I think this is something that people don't realize. And unless you're really a political insider, you don't understand it. But I had personal experience with this because I was president of a riding association for the Liberal Party in British Columbia. provincially. And I didn't realize that I was actually president of a Conservative party, because it was not a Liberal party. It was a Conservative party, and everyone that was in that organization was a federal Conservative supporter. And so the BC Liberal Party, the BC Liberal Provincial Party really is, I think, a Conservative party. And the Quebec Liberal Party is sort of a mixture of Liberals and Conservatives, is it not?
Well, I mean, nowadays, the time period that Tasha is talking about, I think is historically correct. Nowadays, you have the Coalition Avenir Québec, which I would characterize as at least a quasi conservative party. Some of the stuff they do that is not. But if you're a soft nationalist conservative, you're probably voting CAQ in Quebec now. So there wouldn't be a lot of crossover between the Quebec Liberal Party, Parti libéral de Québec, and the Federal Conservative Party, let's say.
Anymore.
I disagree. I disagree with that, Tony. I think that the wrinkle, though, is that there's a Conservative Party in Quebec now, too.
Sure,
there's
that's
a Conservative Party led by Eric Duhem. It's got 50,000 members. Now, this is also a bit of a product of the pandemic and the anti-mandates conversation that's been had there. And that translates into the federal race, too, because, there's a populist element that has crossed over into the federal Conservative Party. And I think this leadership race will really determine how much sway that has going forward in the politics of our country. And it is not an element we've really seen to the same extent here. We associate it maybe more with American, or we associate it with Brexit. We associate it with a trend that's really swept the world, but hasn't come here as much. And it kind of reared its head during last election. There were people who were screaming at Trudeau and throwing gravel and, doing all sorts of things we really hadn't seen, sort of angry feeling we hadn't seen in our politics here. And I really, truly hope that this leadership becomes a debate, like I said, of ideas and policies and personalities too, but it doesn't devolve into that anger, because that, I think, will turn a lot of voters off who otherwise might want to join the Conservative Party.
But could it also turn some voters on? Obviously populism has been a big wave in the United States and around the world. And Tony, Pierre Poilievre, he went out and he took pictures with the truck convoy people, and he's clearly trying to appeal to that populism and create that populism, isn't he?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, Pierre is in favor of legal dissent. When it becomes illegal and blockade, he would not support that. So I want to put that on the table right away, and we can move on. And let's not denigrate populism. Populism has been a strain in Canadian politics for well over 100 years. When you think about the Progressive Party in the 1920s and Mitch Hepburn in the 1930s in Ontario, that's populism. I would say Justin Trudeau in 2015 was a populist, legalize cannabis, take care of the middle class because they're downtrodden. Those are populist messages. So to say that this is a new thing or a Trump thing or a Brexit thing, I don't think is historically accurate in the historical context of Canada. And I think that we can have in the Conservative Party of Canada that big tent, which includes those fiscal conservatives, and it includes social conservatives, and it includes environmental conservatives, and so on. But it includes people who want to make sure that we are connected to the hopes and aspirations of people. And if you don't do that as a Conservative Party, you're not going to get very far. So, I don't know whether you call that populism or you call that just, being in touch with people's concerns, but I think that is not something to be feared in conservative politics. It's something to be embraced.
Yeah, there's different strains of populism, though. And you're absolutely right to mention the progressive parties of the NDP also is built on the union movement, which could have been seen as somewhat populist in nature. But right-wing populism is a different breed. I mean, we know this. And I guess the concern a lot of people have is, where does that lead to in terms of enlarging the tent? Because you can veer off in different directions politically. I mean, Justin Trudeau's veered off to the left, so far in some ways you can't even see him anymore. But his party is also not totally thrilled with that. And we've seen some cracks within it too, which is really interesting. A lot of people think he may not be the adversary next time around. He may take that walk in the snow. There are people positioning within his own party. I mean, Chrystia Freeland is no secret. Lots of people see her as a PM in waiting. So the question then becomes, who's the best person for the Conservatives to take on that Liberal Party? Who can win in the next election? And to build that winning coalition, you need to get some of those Liberal voters or the switch voters, blue liberals, red Tories, whatever you want to call them, on the edge there. And how do you do that without alienating your base? Because I agree, conservative base is what it is, but
and that's going to be the ballot question. That's going to be the ballot question for conservative voters. And I would just say that when you look, I've been heavily involved with two conservative leaders in my time. One was Mike Harris in 1995 in Ontario, and the second was Stephen Harper in 2006 nationally. And both of them were not very well liked by the liberal elites. And both of them, I heard people time and again in both of those cases, he's just too far right. He's too, what they didn't call a populist at the time, but he's too far off the deep end. They said that about Harris. They said that about Harper. And, we don't do very well as conservatives when we try to genuflect too much to that point of view. The editorial board of the Toronto Star is not our test audience, I would have to say. And so I think we have to be comfortable who we are as conservatives with a leader who is forthrightly conservative, but he must, as Tasha said, that person, he or she, must speak to the needs and the aspirations of regular folks. And I think that's why I support Pierre so strongly, because I know he can do that. He is the best communicator we have in the party, bar none.
There was a column in one of the papers this weekend that said it was a fight between the Mulroney party and the Harper party, and that Mulroney was this big tent with a base in Quebec, and that Harper was too much right wing and Western oriented. Is that at all fair, Tasha?
I don't think that's fair. I think Stephen Harper's coalition it was different than Brian Mulroney's coalition, because there was the Bloc Québécois to contend with in Quebec. And that is a very important element going forward to the next election too. For Stephen Harper to break through in Quebec was always difficult because of that chunk of voters that was taken up by the Bloc. And it waxed and waned over time. But now we know there's a Quebec election coming up this fall. The PQ is not scoring well. Neither is the Liberal Party, may I add. Things are polarizing a lot between the Quebec Solidaire and the CAQ, and with the Conservatives thrown in the mix too. So what's going to happen if the PQ goes down? And that will definitely affect the Bloc Québécois. I mean, what raison d'etre will the Bloc have if its cousins are no longer strong in the provincial scene? There will not be the resources, the volunteers, the finances, all that stuff, which really cross over between the two. So you're going to see the Bloc weakened. That's a huge opportunity for the Conservatives in Quebec to rebuild that coalition, the Mulroney version, which had Quebec in it as a strong player. And that needs a leader who understands national unity, who understands Quebec and not just speaks the language. That's easy. It's the culture. You got to know what Quebecers feel and want. And it is a distinct society. I'm from there. Trust me, I know. And it's, they've got their own star system. Quebec has differences that unless you're from there or have spent time there, you don't really get. Jean Charest gets that, obviously. He was premier of the province for a decade. So he knows that. And yes, there are people in Quebec who love him, and there's some people who don't. But the point is, he gets it. And I think on a national level, there'll be that sense that he can bring the country together because he does understand a very important part of it. That is a key to the Conservatives having a majority. And that's very important.
Tony, there's some people that I've heard that rebel against the idea of someone from Quebec. I've heard comments about Laurentian elite. Will the base of the Conservative Party support someone like Jean Charest, who was premier Quebec Liberal Party, is from Quebec, Laurentian elite? Maybe a little bit more center. I'm not going to say left, but certainly a little bit more center than you've had as leaders in the last recent past.
Yeah, I want to separate a couple of the issues. First of all, I think Conservatives do want someone who will do well in Quebec, and I think Pierre Poilievre is going to prove during the leadership race that he's got extensive Quebec support. Senator Leo Housakos from Montreal is the co-chair of his campaign, and so I think that he can pass that test of the Conservative voters of this leadership election by having support in Quebec. You mentioned the Laurentian elites, and I think that is a significant issue for Conservatives. They don't want someone who just caters to the kind of the status quo elitism that has governed this country more often than not. And that's one of the things that Harper had. He could speak to people, and they knew that he wasn't from the storied halls of the Albany Club or what have you. He was different from that, and he spoke about Western alienation, but he also could talk to someone outside of the Toronto in the 905, because the 905 was a distinctive area code and group of people in those days. And I'm talking 2004 and 2005. So I think that conservatives are looking for somebody who can bridge that gap. I agree with Tasha on that. But at the same time, they're going to look for someone who expresses their conservative values. And there will be a debate about that. Tasha mentioned Jean's record in Quebec. I'm sure there'll be some discussion about the tax rises. I remember when we cut the GST by 2 points when we first got elected, Jim Flaherty brought in that budget, and Quebec under Monsieur Charest increased their provincial sales tax by the same amount. So there was no benefit for Quebecers as a result of a Conservative Party policy. And there was also the 2008 election, of course, where Jean campaigned against Stephen Harper in that election. So these things will come up. I think ultimately the past is relevant, but most people are going to look to the future. I agree with Tasha on that, and people are going to make that hard decision as to who will propel us forward, who is going to connect with the new generation, who's going to connect with all sorts of voters. And what I saw in 905 over the last 2 days with Pierre is that he can connect with those voters, and that's going to be very important for us.
We're chatting with Tasha Sheridan and Tony Clement tonight, two conservative party stalwarts. One is involved in the Jean Charest campaign, one in the Pierre Poilievre campaign. Both have got great political pedigrees. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Tony and Tasha in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight about the conservative leadership campaign that's going on federally. And we've got Tony Clement, who is working with Pierre Poilievre, and Tasha Sheridan, who is working with Jean Charest tonight on our radio broadcast. Tony, I wonder if I could ask you a question. And this is less a question, frankly, of the campaign, and it's a question that really is of politics generally, if I could. You talked about freedom being this rallying cry. Twice in the last 2 weeks, I've had people react very negatively to that word. I was out in North Battleford, Saskatchewan, where my company has a shopping center. And I met with the leaders of two different tribal band councils. And they said that when the Canadian flag is attached to a pickup truck and driving by and people are yelling freedom, they think racism, white supremacy, and Confederate flags. They say they've taken the Canadian flag down off of their reserves. Because the Canadian flag, because of what's happened in Ottawa and in Coates and in Windsor, the Canadian flag no longer stands for what it stood before. It now stands comparable to a Confederate flag, and freedom is not what they're about. That they thought Canada was about community, about supporting your fellow citizen. And then I interviewed a gentleman, a Rastafarian singer, a hip hop singer from Brampton, who just last week got a park named after him. He won a Juno Award, and he said much the same thing. And he said, if it was me up on Parliament Hill with my other Rastafarian friends, we would have been shot. But the reason they weren't is because they were wearing baseball caps, hockey jerseys. They were white and they had beards on. And similarly, he had a distaste for the Canadian flag, thought the Canadian flag had changed its image, and that this rallying cry of freedom was appropriate, maybe in New Hampshire, where it's freedom. I can't remember the
live free or die.
Live free or die. But it's not what Canada is all about. And so I got to ask you: is freedom really the right rallying cry for Canada?
Well, look, I think it's very unfortunate that people, and this trend about the Canadian flag predated the trucker convoy protest. I remember for Canada 150, this narrative. I believe it's a false ridiculous, stupid narrative that Canada is unfree, that Canada is to be ashamed of, that we should not be celebrating the birth of our nation state. I think that is wrong. It's ridiculous, and it is by people who want to tear down these institutions. Like they call them white supremacist institutions. This is democracy. That's an institution. Rule of law is an institution. That is what has made a great, free, prosperous, diverse country. So I don't agree with them. I think they're wrong. I think it's unfortunate that they're trying to tear down our Canadian flag. And I think that most people, the great, great, great majority of Canadians, love our flag. They love our country. Yes, it's a work in progress. Yes, we have to have more justice in our country, but we love our country. And those are the people that any conservative who is leader, has to appeal to. We have to heal the divisions. Absolutely. Pierre will be saying a lot about healing divisions as well. And I know Jean has talked about that. But at the same time, we can't keep tearing down our country. This is a great country. It's an amazing country. Anyone who's lived anywhere else and has come to this country knows that. And I just don't like this narrative. I reject it. I think it's terrible.
Tasha, what do you think? I really got the impression in both watching what was going on in Ottawa and frankly in talking to these people that there's an element of our society that has harmed the brand of Canada. My own son says he's not sure whether he'll wear the Canadian flag as proudly on his knapsack if he goes to Europe, because the Canadian flag doesn't mean the same thing anymore after the occupation in Ottawa.
Yeah, well, to Tony's point, the Canadian flag's been taking a beating for a while. I mean, the residential schools issue and the lowering of the flag was from a different perspective, but yes, implying that Canada has things to atone for. I think the protests, though, in Ottawa, it took a very different tone, and to the point of law and order, that was not on display at all, and reverence for law and order was not on display. And there were some elements in there. It's been found now by the National Security Officer who did want to overthrow the government. I mean, most of the people who were there did not have that perspective, but they were being used, quite frankly, by people who had other motivations. And the problem for the Conservative Party is if you start ascribing those other motivations to the Conservative Party, because members of the party, some MPs stood with the people who were in the crowd or took selfies and were seen to be supporting, then you have a serious brand problem for the Conservative Party. I agree the Conservative Party stands for freedom, but there's also responsibility, and that's not been talked about. It's in the party constitution, rights and responsibilities. And that goes to the original ethos of conservatism, which is the little platoons of society of Edmund Burke, the individual, but also the community, local governance, the notion you don't have a big top-down government, yes, telling you what to do. People make decisions based on tradition and based on the heritage they feel contributes to going forward. So it's an incremental process. It's not revolution. It was created against the revolution in France. That's the whole point of conservatism. So this wild, let's get rid of the government, freedom yelling in the streets of Ottawa is the antithesis of that. And that's what troubled me. That's in fact what got me potentially into the race. And that's why I'm supporting Jean in this race now, because I feel Canadian conservatism is very different. And Canadian conservatism does not go to those extremes. It has a different phase. It is also about unity, which is the quintessential Canadian question, holding our country together. Every prime minister has been, since Macdonald, herding cats is how he described it at the Charlottetown Conference in 1867. He had to herd cats to get Confederation going. To Tony's point, our country has a lot to be proud of because it was really hard to put it together. And it's, it has to be maintained. So I think that is the key question in this leadership is who can go forward, unify both the party and the country, and then win the next election.
So I think one of the things that, sorry, I was just going to add, Brian, one of the things conservatives have to strive against is denormalizing conservative thinking. The way you told your stories there, Brian, that's what we have to be able to build against, because it is coming to the point in this country where people who have conservative points of view, they are Democrats, they are conservatives, they are not hate-filled, feel that their point of view is being deplatformed by society, by media, by the elites, if I can put it that way. And that's why the trucker convoy, although it had some symbols of hate and some people who were jerks and assholes, that's why when the convoy was going through North Bay or going through Calgary, there were people lined up on the highways to cheer them on, because they felt that they were not being listened to by society anymore, by polite society or by the salons of Ottawa anymore. And so that's why we have to reconnect with those people, make sure that they understand that they have a voice and that they will be listened to, not always agreed with, but they will be listened to. And I think that's it won't be Justin Trudeau who does that. He's already pitched his tent on denormalizing anyone who doesn't agree with him. It's going to have to be the next Conservative leader.
So do you think that Pierre Poilievre going out into that trucker convoy and taking pictures will be seen as a positive or as a negative? And I ask that both within the Conservative leadership and within the upcoming general election.
Well, look, I know this is the third time we've talked about the trucker convoy in this interview. I'm detecting a trend. Look, I've seen Pierre's message over the last 2 days in the GTA, and his message is one of hope, of opportunity, of making sure that things are affordable again for average Canadians, whether it's the price of gasoline and marshaling our natural resources to reduce the price of gasoline, or whether it's a cost of a home, which is out of reach for so many millennials right now. That's his message. And that's a message I'm proud to support. And that's the message that's going to win this leadership.
I think those are the key issues as well. The question then becomes of how do you do that? And that's the thing I find, you got to have an actual plan to do that. In some cases, you can't do a hell of a lot about it either. To say you're going to reduce inflation, well, okay, then you hike interest rates, right? And so does that mean telling the Bank of Canada to do that? The government
stop printing money. Stop printing money to finance government deficits.
Tony, all of us agree to stop. Well, it's not printing, it's borrowing money to finance the deficit. I totally agree. I agree the government went way too much in the hole during the pandemic. After the first waves of support, instead of targeting support, really making sure that it wasn't just being a big blanket thrown over everyone, because it had terribly disproportionate effects, especially in rural parts of the country where the amount of money that was being thrown at this, dissuaded people from working. You ask any, construction firm or roofing company out, in Northern Ontario, or for example, and I know this because I have a place up there, people couldn't find workers because they're like, well, they get CERB and they're not working. And people aren't lazy. It's just they make the best economic choices available to them. So if you're getting CERB, then you won't necessarily have to work as hard. So there was a lot of lessons from this about why the Liberals failed. And I think the Conservatives need to capitalize on that, but they have to avoid the trap that you mentioned, Brian, about being tarred with intolerance, because intolerance is the biggest problem for the Conservatives. Goes back to 2015 and the snitch line. I've talked to candidates, especially in the GTA, candidates from visible minority communities who said they'd go to the door and be told they were racist because they were conservative, and because of that snitch line, and because the Conservatives are intolerant. So we have to be really careful to avoid that. And I know Pierre's been making inroads or going into the Mississauga communities. That's great. But it needs to be more than that. It needs to be, like unifying the country as a whole. And I know Jean Charest is going to be doing that and going around, and he's been getting a great reception from people out west where people were told, oh, he won't resonate there. What Westerner would support Jean Charest? You're wrong. It's going to be all communities, alienated communities, invisible minority communities, everyone who feels they don't have that voice, to your point, that they're not being listened to. And he will listen to them. So in the last two elections, I think I'm right in this regard. You didn't win any seats in Peel, where I broadcast from, other than one in Caledon. So none in Mississauga, none in Brampton, with both of your prior leaders, Aaron O'Toole and, who was the prior guy? Andrew Scheer. You forgot him already? I apologize. Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole. And now you've got Patrick Brown running. And Patrick Brown has been renowned for reaching out into those ethnic communities. He's mayor of Brampton, came from, Barrie and from federal politics and then provincial politics in a challenging situation, and won Brampton handily. And so he's coming, and he's clearly going to be appealing to that ethnic
group that you have in suburban 905 Toronto. You got Leslie Ann Lewis that is going to be appealing to the social conservatives. You've got Roman Baber, who's going to be appealing to the anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers. Tell me how you think those three people will be playing in the leadership campaign.
Well, I think Patrick, of course, I've known him well. I served in Parliament with him and knew him in the YPCs, the young PCs, before either of us were elected to Parliament. And he's a formidable campaigner. There's no question about it. And so he'll have an impact on the race. I'm not sure how well known he is outside of Ontario, to be honest with you. So he's going to have to build up a national team, not just an Ontario team. And that's kind of what he's got to do. All I can tell you, because I used to be a Brampton member of provincial parliament, Brampton, West Mississauga, from 1999 to 2003. So Brampton and Mississauga in that legislature. I can tell you that one should not try to suggest that these communities are monolithic. They are not. They have different people with different ideas and different values and different predilections. So I think that Patrick is going to do well in some of those communities in 905. And I think Pierre is going to get his fair share of supporters. I'm sure Jean aspires to do that as well. So yeah, it's going to be very competitive in 905, but I don't think any one person is going to be say, I've got this block of voters in 905 that is going to bring me to victory. I don't think it's going to work that way.
To build on what Tony said, I think that everyone's going to be competing. I agree. In the 905, everyone's going to be competing to get votes to grow the base to communities that may not have felt represented previously. I think I'll talk a bit about Leslie Lewis and Roman Baber, if I'm mispronouncing it.
Baber.
Correct. Baber. There we go. But Leslie Lewis obviously will be appealing to social conservatives. Campaign Life already has her on their front, page on their webpage. Big picture, saying to vote for her. They've put out literature saying don't vote for anyone else, basically, in this race. I mean, I don't know if Jean Charest was on that list. He wasn't a candidate, but certainly Pierre. They had me too, even though I wasn't officially running, saying that we were pro-choice and that was not acceptable. So there will be that. But and Roman will appeal to the crowd that doesn't like mandates, even though those are lifting. So will that be really as much of an issue by the time the voting in August comes around? Remains to be seen. But the question is where their second ballot support will go. That's really the issue for these candidates. We know Leslie Lewis last time around, she placed very high. She came third. Her votes were key in deciding who won the leadership. So again, that's the issue, will be where will the down ballot support from both of these individuals go? And what do you do as the other candidates to make sure that you don't alienate potential support? And that goes to the civility of the race, right? This race, in my view, should be a showcase for talent for the party. So the country looks and says, wow, there's a whole team of people, all of whom bring different elements, but all of whom are quality candidates, people that we would like to see in Parliament. And that's a positive tone, because if people start ripping each other apart, or they already have, like I said, if they do that too much, what it's going to do is, first of all, as a candidate, you're not going to get the down ballot support if you rip your opponents. But second of all, it makes the whole party look bad. So candidates have an advantage to present a positive face as opposed to tearing people down, both internally in the race and externally as well.
So you think that's happening already? I've seen some tweets about,
Sure.
not being a true conservative and stuff like that. Is that a positive or a negative?
Well, it's a negative. I mean, I think, look, Tony's right. Everyone should have to stay on their record. And that's a legitimate thing to say, people supported different positions in the past, but to simply attack them for labels and say, oh, well, he was liberal, so he can't be a conservative. Leona Alslev was a liberal federally. She's now she was a conservative after that. No one held that against her. The conservatives were very happy to have her across the floor. So, this kind of stuff, and it happens a lot in social media. I don't know how much the social media piece will play in this leadership, again, because there's going to be a period of time in the summer where the candidates will go meet the people. And I think that's going to make a big difference. I do still think that's where leaderships are won, but it certainly is, it makes a buzz and gets reported on. And it tarnishes the whole party when you see this kind of mud flying around.
Tony?
I mean, I think that, you're going to get people commenting on records. People are commenting on Pierre's record, people commenting on Jean's record as premier. They're commenting on his advocacy for Huawei. I think that's all fair game. As long as you're not saying his mother wore army boots. I think, talking about somebody's record is going to happen and should be encouraged. But I think Tasha is also right. It's going to be a very different race from the last one. I was involved on Aaron O'Toole's campaign last time, and it was drudgery because everything was locked down, Brian. Everything was COVID. You couldn't, it was like a series of unending Zoom calls. That was the leadership race. It was brutal. This time, I've already been to 3 events in 24 hours, and it's great. You're seeing people again. They're mixing and mingling. They're recounting old times. They're listening to Pierre, and they'll come out for Jean. They'll come out for Patrick. That's great. So I think this race will have that positivity to it that the last race was just, again, let's not repeat that, please, because it was not fun.
I think we canceled the last 2 years, period. Just generally.
Exactly. Yeah.
Please.
We're chatting with Tasha Keridan and Tony Clement about the current conservative leadership campaign. We're going to take a break and come back with some really quick concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I've had a lot of fun chatting with Tasha Keridan and Tony Clement tonight. Tony's not wanting to take all my questions, but hey, that's typical for my interactions with Tony over the years. We've only got a few minutes left. I want to ask the two of you, if I could, about the next stage and how is the Conservative Party going to beat the Liberals in the next election, do you think? Tony, first to you.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Pierre's hashtag is hashtag Pierre for PM, and he's looking. He obviously doesn't take anything for granted, but he knows that people are going to judge based on who can take on Justin Trudeau or whoever the Liberal leader is. I think Pierre's point of view is the Liberals are so out of touch right now. They don't even know what people are going through in terms of trying to make ends meet and trying to put gas in their tank and so on. And that we need a party that can connect to those voters, talk about those economic issues in language they understand. And Pierre is the best communicator that the Conservative Party of Canada has right now. When he did his announcement video, it has had over 12 million downloads, 12 million with an M, and that shows that his reach is well beyond the Conservative Party of Canada. He can win the country for us.
Tasha?
Yeah. Well, it could also be, anyway, I'll say social media has a reach all around the world too. So we don't know what everyone's watching, but people are watching Canada. And that to me is the problem for the Liberals. Our country's been weakened on the international stage. It's been weakened domestically. Our economy is weaker. To Tony's point, people are struggling. And that to me is going to be the issue. To go to slogans, Jean Charest is build to win. And it is not built to win. And it's not something about the party. It's about him as a candidate. Really, it is about the country has to be built to win. We have to rebuild what we had as a country, which is including pride in our country. It is an industrial base in our country. It is dealing with the issues of energy and the environment and moving those forward in a way that respects and honors the oil sands and what they've contributed to Canada, but also moves into things like critical minerals and the next generation of energy. Canada could be a superpower in the world. And that's what I think we need to do as a party, is give people hope and a vision. And the Liberals will just fall away in the shadows, because that's the one thing they have not given us. They've been muddling through. They have not had a vision for Canada that appeals to people, and that has been achieved. So that's what Conservatives need to do.
Tasha Keridan, Tony Clement, thank you so much for joining us on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour and chatting about this Conservative leadership campaign. During the last campaign, I was able to interview every single one of the candidates but one. And so hopefully the two of you will put in a good word for me to get your prospective candidates to participate. If I could end with my own final comment, I think that one of the big benefits of leadership campaigns is that they really do get other people involved. And I got involved when I was 12 years old in my first leadership campaign, and it was exciting. I learned a lot. I met people and friends that became friends that I just had dinner with on Thursday night, as one example. And so they become lifelong friends. And some people that you become lifelong rivals of as well, which is also kind of fun and part of the reality. But for all of you out there listening, if you're at all intrigued by what Tony has said or what Tasha has said and what Jean Charest or or Pierre Poilievre or any of the other candidates stand for, get involved, because that is one of the best ways that you can contribute to our society. And you get involved in a leadership campaign or a political campaign thereafter, you will find incredible knowledge about your company, knowledge about the policies, excitement about being involved in the political process, and you'll make